All right, new year, new tier list. I know I'm a little bit late on this one. The Rockville lineup's been out for probably about almost 2 months at this point. But, it still wouldn't feel right if I didn't go back and do a tier list. I already did a video talking about my general thoughts and opinions, but this helps me kind of lay it out and decide what I'm going to do when I ultimately go to make my schedule. Now, again, as with previous tier lists, I do have a tier list or a tier level for the bands that I'm not super familiar with or don't feel comfortable ranking. I know there's some bands on here that I'm definitely looking to check out that have gotten a lot of buzz from the community going into this. Like The Warning is a pretty big recommendation. We got Violent Vira as well. I know someone who's been popping off lately. There's a lot of bands in here that I know are really good and that people really enjoy. And if you have any specific recommendations, let me know down in the comment section below who I should be checking out. I will come back and kind of do another tier list / probably make my schedule type video closer to the festival itself because I am going to be attending. So that'll be fun. We can kind of see how my opinions have changed between now and closer to the festival. A lot of the bands will probably stay in the same spot, but it'll be fun. So tiers we're going off again. Can't miss Priority, which I went back and looked at Sick New World. I liked the Priority versus try or want to see. I think it's spice. It makes the tiers a little bit more distinguishable. So we got Priority, Try to See. If no one else is playing, your gimmicks, and then no interest at all, or bands that I would not recommend. Now, I'm going to try to, obviously not 100% able to, because as you can already see, I don't know a lot of death metal. I'm not up on my death metal, unfortunately. This is a blind spot for me. I'm going to try to keep this, though, as objective as I can. Again, hard with music, but I'm going off of what I think would generally be interesting to see. A lot of these bands I have seen live already. The reason I have the gimmicks tier is just because it's a buy-in thing, as it is with all these groups. You got to be able to buy in. So if you're going to buy in, then great. This is what I'm going off of. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, first band we're going to talk about, if I can get this lined up right, we're going to talk about 10 Years. Now, 10 Years is a band that is more of a radio-centric band, and there's a few of those too where I only really know a few songs or can kind of go off of that. They're a band that has unfortunately eluded me a lot through the years of my concert-going experiences. I've tried to catch them a few times, just hasn't lined up. Whether it's, I had other plans or I got to the show a little bit late and they were opening or something along those lines. So they are a band that I do enjoy a lot. I think Wasteland is probably one of my favorite just alt-rock songs, whatever category you kind of want to put them into. I really like that song. That's a big hit. They got good songs like Fix Me. I really like Shoot It Out. Beautiful. Novocaine was a more recent one that was big for them. So I think they're a pretty generally reliable band. They're playing on the 5th stage, which has an extra spot this year. So that's when you go, if you have like paid parking, you're going to walk right into them when you come in around probably like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the day. So if you're going to the festival a little bit late on Saturday, maybe stop by and check them out on your way through. I'm going to go ahead and put them into Try to See for now. I'm going to keep these relatively in order too. I'm going to try and use these kind of as barometers for each other. And I'm going to put them in Try to See, but I could definitely see them moving up depending how this tier list goes. All right, we're now shifting to almost the complete opposite end of the spectrum with 303, the renowned, I don't even know what you would technically say is like electro pop. It's kind of like comedy, electro rock, a little bit, somewhat anyway. I mean, their music is kind of self-serious, but it's also joking too. So it's kind of in that weird line. It's like borderline a gimmick, honestly. But I'm going to go ahead and put them in Try to See. I did catch them at Warped, and they were pretty entertaining. It's almost entirely dependent on if you are into the style of music. It's, again, more like electronica, and the emo crowd's got a lot of crossover with that, too, as far as this group. I think they're pretty fun, pretty entertaining. I like it. I don't take it too seriously. So I like their music. I'm going to put them in Try to See. Next up is Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper, for me, is borderline. If you haven't seen him, a can't miss just for the spectacle of the stage show. And the quality of the music is really solid all across the board. For now, I'm going to drop it into Priority. I'll probably stay toward the top of Priority. We might end up moving it up to the top before the final list is complete. But yeah, Alice Cooper, really good live. I've seen him a couple times now. And just gives on a super entertaining show. Got a really good catalog, really deep, a lot of fun. Kind of a for all ages thing. If you're taking your dad, you can kind of like if you're taking you're a little bit older and you're in that age range of Alice Cooper, kind of grew up with him. You can take your kids and see they'll enjoy it. I think anyway. I had a couple friends who are in my age range that got turned on because their parents took them. So that's it's kind of a for all ages pick in a way too. We got All That Remains next up on the list. For All That Remains, I kind of want to put them in priority. I think they're kind of like a little bit, they're like a little bit ahead of 10 years for me. So for now, I'm going to drop them into Try to See. They're a little bit heavier, like a metalcore band, and they got some good stuff. You know, again, a little bit older, late 2000s stuff is what I kind of resonate more with. I know there's some stuff a little bit later in their catalog that kind of pops off too, like What If I Was Nothing. I'm really more of the like 2 weeks Chiron era. I like This Calling and Six as well. And then, you know, some of the stuff that's in the middle, like Hold On. But, you know, they're a band that, again, like 10 years, I've tried to see a few times and it just never seems to line up the right way. They've been at this festival announced like 2 or 3 separate times and didn't end up playing. So this is another like makeup day. They put them in like the opening slot on the second main stage on day 1. So it's like we're really in makeup territory at this point. They're not even like getting to be on a side stage with like a 40 or 50 minute set. They're probably gonna play like 5 songs. And we'll be like, all right, you guys are done. And the first person, the reason we got All Time Low, who was playing Sunday, opening a couple of spots before My Chemical Romance. One thing that Rockville didn't do as well as Sonic Temple is I don't think they did the kind of grouping of bands quite as well. They did for a couple of their side stages, but the Sunday main stage is just a little strange, kind of all over the place genre-wise. But All Time Low on the more emo end of the spectrum. They're another, for me, I would say probably Try to See maybe ahead of these two. They're kind of in that same vein. They're, again, a little bit more on the emo side. They're more alt-rocky, though. Yeah, actually, I'm going to put them closer to priority because I do think that they put on a really good live show, and their songs are just generally really fun to hear live. That's another aspect that kind of goes into it as well. And again, I'm trying to put this more into perspective of if I didn't really have like genre preferences, and just based off my experience seeing them or what I've seen from live clips or what I would expect from a live show from them or just how good quality consistency I think their music is. I think All Time Low's got a really good live set list. They can bang out, 8 to 12 songs that are really, really consistently good and enjoyable and fun to see live. And they put on a good show. They're a good performer. Now, Amon Amarth, borderline gimmick. I'm going to throw them in gimmicks, but I will say if you're into... if you check these guys out, they're Viking metal, closer to, and that kind of, I think, is the easiest way to describe them. Really high quality music, though. Like most of these gimmick groups, I think actually all of these gimmick groups really put on, like, have high quality stuff behind them. Like they have good material. So it's really just dependent on how much you're going to enjoy the gimmick or how much enjoyment you think you're going to get out of the gimmick. All right, another tier I actually have to add because I forgot all about it up until now. I don't know why I'm struggling to do this so much, is not the original singer. And the whole reason that I even recognized I didn't have it is because we got to talk about Anne Boleyn, who are one of my favorite bands. I think they're really good live, even with the new singer, but just keep in mind that might hinder your experience or kind of what you kind of temper expectations as far as going into seeing them live. I don't think they're as good as they were with the original singer, solely from the perspective of... This applies to every band, too. Every band that goes in this category. Just because it's not going to be the same as the original song, even if, there is differences between hearing it live and hearing it on record anyway. It's a little bit different, especially when there's not the original singer. Just you have to go in with that knowledge, that expectation, anticipation of knowing that it's probably not going to match up to how you're kind of expecting it to be. That said, their new singer, although the sound is a little bit off, his voice definitely isn't very similar or all that similar to the original singer. He does bring a certain energy and edge to the songs that I still think make it pretty enjoyable. And I just think Anne Boleyn's a really good band. So I think the quality of song helps with that as well. But he's a good performer as well. Now, Apocalyptica, metal with cellos. We're going to go ahead and throw this into gimmicks. Should check them out. I like a lot of their old material. Another thing that you kind of have to take into account with them, though, is that a lot of their music has featured artists. So if you're more into their kind of mainstream, like I Don't Care... or I'm Not Jesus, or that song that they have with Brent Smith. They've made a song with Gavin Rossdale from Bush that I really like as well. So a lot of their music is not going to be, or a lot of their bigger songs, you're not going to have the original singer anyway. It's probably played from tape. I'm not 100% sure. Architects, I'm going to go ahead and say you should try to see. Maybe toward the bottom. They've taken a little bit of a weird artistic turn. I kind of think I touched on it in Sonic Temple's breakdown of them, but I'm not as crazy about their newer music. I think that I definitely still listen to more of their metalcore stuff overall. and I don't listen to them nearly as much as I used to be quite honest. But I've definitely still have some level of interest in seeing them, and they would be kind of a maybe they're the top of if no one else is playing. Honestly, they're kind of toward the bottom of this try to see tier though for me right now. Atreyu is a group they kind of fall into the not the original singer category. The long story short of Atreyu is they had two singers. One for when they originally were just a metal band with like almost no clean vocals, and then their drummer started doing clean vocals. They kind of split for a while. They have some more rock songs that don't have scream vocals. Eventually, they kicked the original singer out a few years ago. I think like 5 or 6 years ago now, and now it's just the drummer who does all the vocals. I don't think he drums anymore, but the clean vocalist will say just does all the clean vocals and the screaming. So they're pretty good live. I would go ahead and say they should be a try to see kind of in this range. I would say like with Atreyu, all that remains. I think I'll put them just behind 10 years and all that remains though. Honestly. Now, most people, they have a kind of weird genre mix or not genre mix, but like kind of audience mix. Because I know there's some people probably only know their newer stuff. Some people probably only know their older stuff. They do a pretty good job of kind of balancing it out. You'll still hear like X's and O's. I think when I saw them, they even played Lip Gloss and Black. Recently, they just did a tour for the Massacre. That's the name of the second album. The one with Bleeding Mascara, The Curse. Bleeding Mascara and Right Side of the Bed. When I saw them, they played Right Side of the Bed. They played Lip Gloss and Black. They played X's and O's and Falling Down. And I think they played Becoming the Bull also. But then they played a few newer songs like Battle Drums and Blow. So they still, keep a lot of the spirit of their older music alive and well, which is something that not all these bands necessarily do the best. Attack Attack is another, not the original singer. They don't even have any original members, so I think, other than one. So, it sucks to say, but they're not the crabcore legends that I wish that they still were, unfortunately. This is an interesting one to talk about next. This is a band called Biffy Clyro. Now, this is a band that's not very big in the United States. This is a band that I personally am very passionate about, but I'm going to try to divorce myself from that passion for the purpose of this and try to make just a small argument that even though I think that if I was doing this list and when I do this list and sit down and say this is what my schedule is going to be, this is absolutely in the can't miss tier for me. This is like one of my personal favorite bands. But I would still say try to prioritize them because they're not a very big band in the United States. They don't play very many shows here that often. And I think that their live show is definitely worth checking out. Their music is a little bit hard to describe. They're closer to just straight alt-rock at this point in their career. They've been doing that kind of lane for the last about 15 to 20 years. They started as a kind of emo-ish post-hardcore kind of influenced weird alt-rock band and then went more straight for like radio alt-rock. Kind of weird because alt-rock's so all-encompassing in so many ways. But I'm not going to put them quite in can't miss, even though for me personally they would be. I still think that you should try to prioritize them pretty heavily if you have the chance. They're playing a small slot on the 5th stage at probably like 5, 6 o'clock at night. So they're going to probably come up against a lot of these other bands that are up here. But, if it's at a spot where you're like, I don't really care for Lamb of God or Highly Suspect, and that's the band that's playing on the main stage at that time, I would say go check them out. All right, Black Label Society, I think I put in no interest, but I'm going to bump them for here just to, if no one else is playing. I think they're pretty solid. Like, that type of music is not that well represented just in general in the community anymore because they're more like Southern rock, obviously, Black Label, the drinking type of motorcycling lifestyle. Zakk Wylde's a great guitarist, not the best singer. I've actually seen these guys at a festival before. I think it was actually at a Rockville. And they're decently entertaining, but you have to really like this type of music. I think they're worth checking out if no one else is playing. That's exactly what its categories here. Here's another not the original singer. We're going with Bless the Fall. I really like their early stuff. I haven't listened to them a whole lot kind of lately, and I know that they're taking one of the turns that a lot of bands that used to be bigger in that metalcore scene do as their careers progress. So they got a little bit more kind of poppy, more just straight metal, kind of like radio friendly-ish, a little bit less like of the screaming elements. But, still, I'd say probably worth checking out if, a few songs, maybe see if it lines up where they're not playing at the same time as anybody else you want to see. I think they're playing stage 5 on day 1. So actually, I lied. They're on main stage. Good for them. Early day main stage slot. I'm happy for them. All right, another one. Breathe Carolina. This is another kind of similar to 303, but no comedy element to it. There's not like there's less or more of a self-seriousness, although I guess it's not necessarily. I think the kind of defining difference for me between like a Breathe Carolina and a 303 is that 303 can pull off a song like Don't Trust Me or Starstruck with a level of humor, and then obviously they have like some of the stupid stuff later on in their career with this like humor and kind of irony to it. And Breathe Carolina is more like just sceney. They're like a "you don't get it, mom" type of version of 303. Similar musically, but the spirit is less of an ironic way and more of like this is real art that we're making right now. It's very conflicted because I have a personal relationship with them that should make me not want to put them in no interest, but I'll put them at the bottom of if no one else is playing for right now. I don't want to be too mean. Because to compare Breathe Carolina to this next band would be unfair, because this is the definition of no interest. Now, I sit here and talk about how great Buck Cherry used to be. Well, great might be a stretch of the imagination, but their first album has some good stuff on it. I really like 15. That's got some really good songs on it too. But here's the reality. The only song you're going to hear off either of those albums is maybe Sorry, but in Crazy Bitch, and both those songs are really bad, in my opinion. And a lot of their other stuff is just the new stuff that's retreading all the old songs that were better, and they're just not as good anymore. I think, like I said, their best stuff was early, and they're not playing it anymore. So, can't really recommend it. His voice also is not in the best shape. I did look up live footage of them a couple years ago, and it's a little bit rough. Might have just got unlucky, but still, that's all I really got to go off of as far as that specific kind of criteria for evaluation. Our BVB is a band that I almost borderline wanted to put in not familiar, but I am familiar with them enough to say that I think you should try to see. I'm going to bump them probably up to the top of try to see, maybe not quite a priority, but they're a band that I listened to a lot in high school, kind of when they first came out, first couple albums. Never really kept up with it, kind of fell off for me, and then I didn't directly catch their set at Warped Orlando, but I saw it from kind of a distance as I was navigating around the grounds, and they got me very intrigued, and I'm going to try to check them out personally if the timing lines up for me, which I think it will, because I'm pretty sure they're playing like one of the first couple days, right? Oh, they're playing Saturday. So they're playing Saturday, kind of midday slot. So maybe they won't get the level of production that they got at Warped, which is really what won me over. But I'm still intrigued, and I want to kind of get back dive a little bit more into some of what their live sets look like and try to go off of that. But I was kind of won over a little bit based on that. They're a band that I admittedly wasn't super familiar with, but they kind of got me interested now. All right, Castle Rat's another gimmick group. They have a very deep lore behind their stuff. It's a lot of deep storytelling. I haven't really checked the whole lot of it out, but what I did see looked pretty intriguing. Something that I might honestly try to see myself. We'll kind of see what the schedule looks like a little bit closer and if it lines up, because I know they're playing early in the day, but I think they're playing early in a day that I'm not planning on being there early. Oh, they're playing Thursday, so I'll probably be there. All right, Chelsea Grin. We got some deathcore. There's not a lot of deathcore that I'm going to talk about, but there's a few deathcore bands that did leave their mark on me over the years, and Chelsea Grin was one of them. I would go ahead and put them in the try to see range, just behind Atreyu, but it's still ahead of 303. Deathcore is a little tough because a lot of it can kind of blend together. It's mostly in my kind of experience, for a lot of the people that I know too, it's kind of who you listen to first, or just whose style that you mesh with the most, that you can kind of pick out stuff from, you tend to stick with. So I've only listened to a few over the years, or kind of still listen to a few here and there, because it's not a genre I admit that I listen to a whole lot even now. But there's some good stuff. Chelsea Grin's one of the ones that I really recommend, and I would definitely say you should try to see if you can. All right, Cold Chamber. I think I talked about in Sick New World I had in this range, but I'm trying to grade this on a curve because there's more bands in general at Rockville. It's four times as long, so I'd hope so. But also because there's just so much more competition and not a lot to see. I think Cold Chamber, I said, was probably one of my like more higher ranked new metal acts. So if you're kind of looking to scratch that itch at some point and get some new metal fixing, because there's not really a whole lot of new metal this year. I don't think there's really any like even borderline new metal headliners or anything like that. If we look toward who's at the bottom, I think like arguably the closest to a new metal band that's in like somewhat of a headlining spot is Breaking Benjamin, and that still to me is not new metal. And just doing like a quick look over, you got Stained. I mean, that's about it. Poppy's kind of doing a new metal thing a little bit, but not really. Like, I mean, Drowning Pool, kind of, not really. I guess Dope, probably the closest. I definitely missing somebody in here. There's definitely like somebody I'm overlooking that's on the new metal kind of side of things. I guess Seven Dust, if you count Seven Dust, or Static, but there's not a whole lot of new metal. So if you're looking to scratch that itch, I think honestly I do like Cold Chamber more than most of the bands that I just named. So I'll put them still in if no one else is playing, but they do feel very specific. They fill more of a specific role. All right, Coheed and Cambria. It's tough for me. I like them live. I think they put on a really entertaining live show. Their set list is more geared toward newer stuff when you see like their actual concerts. But the last festival set I saw had them play The Suffering, they played Favor House, and they played Welcome Home. So they are kind of playing the hits, and that was out of like 6 songs. I actually think they also played No World for Tomorrow, which is an older song as well. So, they kind of like understand the assignment a little bit more. They get to go on the try to see range. I'm going to put them right below 303 though. There's some bands earlier that I also didn't put. Also, if you are looking forward to seeing a band and they are disappearing right before, it's because there are some bands that I actually didn't put in the not familiar tier that I meant to. So apologies for that. There were a couple misses that I've had to kind of correct. All right, next we got Dance Gavin Dance, who I feel like should be kind of growing in profile. It's kind of weird to talk about a lot of these bands because it's interesting to see who's kind of like getting bigger and getting moved up, and then the bands that are kind of staying in the same spot, even though we thought that they would be a little bit further ahead by now. And I felt like by this time, if you had asked me 5 years ago, DGD was playing at 3 o'clock like 4 or 5 years ago, and they're still going to be playing at 3 o'clock now. And I would have thought that they would be a little bit later in the day or kind of moving toward that we're going to close a side stage range, which I think they were closer to a couple years ago. But they're a really good band. They're one that a lot of my friends are into that I'm not as high on, and admittedly I'm not as keen on. So again, I think I'm gonna put them under try to see, kind of around this range. I'll put them right ahead of Chelsea. We'll put them ahead of Chelsea Grin, right behind Atreyu. This tier is getting a little bit heavy, so I might start to move some stuff around. Death Clock, Gimmick. They were the death metal band from Metalocalypse. I am a little bit more familiar with their music than like pretty much any other death metal act on here, and I do like some songs. I'm going to plan on revisiting them. I just don't know if I'm going to end up checking them out. Just the way the schedule falls is really going to be the biggest depending factor for me. Now, in my own personal opinion, Thursday is one of the weaker days, so it opens up a lot of more possibilities for me. But because there's probably going to be one other band that's in the priority or higher tier. So, and again, Gimmicks, I just put here because I don't want to necessarily rank them, amongst these other bands because they were going to require your buy-in a little bit more. They're a little bit tougher to kind of be more objective about. But for me, like personally, I'm very interested in checking out Death Clock. Devil Driver's another, like, they get kind of roped into Gimmicks. But I'll go ahead and I'm going to drop them in if no one else is playing because I think there's a couple of solid songs that I would expect them to play that I would expect to hear, they're bigger ones. But I'm not super familiar with the rest of their stuff. I still think they're a pretty solid group. Definitely worth checking out. I'll be honest. They're probably like the first band I would consider the cutoff line for the not familiar. All right, Dope is another new metal group. I'm gonna drop them. I think they'll kind of take this spot with Cold Chamber. They kind of occupy a similar space in my mind to Cold Chamber, where I like a lot of their stuff. I like a few songs here and there, but I wouldn't necessarily try to like go out of my way to see them. But if I had a hole in my schedule, I'd definitely go check them out. As far as like new metal, they're one of the better, more consistent bands in my opinion. They could fill up a decent set list. Unfortunately, they don't play Nothing For Me Here, their song from Guitar Hero 3, but I wish they did. But, life goes on. All right, Dragon Force, speaking of Guitar Hero 3, we're going to drop that into gimmicks. You can argue they're not a gimmick because they do make pretty straightforward songs with the thematical content. And in my opinion, there's a campiness and like a level of self-awareness and gratuity to it. Like, they're kind of in on the joke. It's like, oh, this is ridiculous, but we know it's ridiculous. And that's what makes it enjoyable. And, they're cool. I'd like to check them out. Again, it's going to depend on how things line up. Unfortunately, in my case, Saturday is like a stacked, like from the gates to the end of the day, somebody that I want to see. And it's just going to get a little bit hairy at that time later in the day. I'm expecting them to play, like roughly at the same time as like Lamb of God or Flyleaf or Biffy Clyro even. Like, so we'll see. Again, I don't want to look too much into that specific aspect of it quite yet because we're not going to know what the schedule really is for a while. But next up, we'll talk about Drowning Pool. This is another not the original singer. They've had the singer they have now, I'm pretty sure, for like a majority of their actual recorded catalog. And if I can like quickly make a little bit of a hot take, I kind of like their post stuff like after the original singer died, maybe a little bit more. What's this stuff? 27 Stitches, Turned So Cold. There's a couple other songs off that album that are pretty good too. I've enjoyed their stuff over the years. They've been kind of one of those like lower profile radio rock bands from the early 2010s. When you had Shinedown and Seether and Five Finger Death Punch at the top of the airwaves, you have to have this middle class. This drowning pool, Adelita's Way, Art of Dying. Those type of bands. Seven Dust fell in this category for a long time as well. I think, the bands that you can hear a lot less than the mainstream bands, but you were always like, they're pretty good. Those are some good songs that those guys make. All right, Flyleaf for me personally is going to be I'm going to throw them into, I'm going to borderline put them into can't miss. They might go down, but I think that the early Flyleaf stuff is so super solid. I mean, you can almost argue them for like kind of scratching a new metal itch. They're kind of bordering on like alt metal and emo. They don't necessarily fit into a scene. They also got the Christian thing going on, so that's kind of a whole categorization issue as well. Because there's a few bands like that kind of got lumped in because they were Christian metal and Christian rock, and maybe they didn't necessarily deserve the labeling or the bias against them. Now, obviously, it's the thematic theme. That's a bad way to phrase that, but you can hear the thematic presence in their lyrics. But I think that they're all around one of the best bands musically that you're going to be able to see here, and they're going to really put on a great show. Unfortunately, the last time that I saw them, they had a lot of audio issues, and I don't know if it lines up for me to really check them out this time either, unfortunately, just because of how the timings are going to fall. I really hope that they do, but they're going to be one of the top bands that I try to schedule around for this weekend. And I would recommend you do the same. They're really good. If you've never heard of Flyleaf, they're probably the band other than Biffy Clyro that I would say check out the most, especially their first album. Lots of good stuff, like front to back. That's almost like a perfect album to me. 4 Year Strong is a newer band. They've made some stylistic changes in the last couple years as well. I remember when I checked them out on the tour With a Day to Remember. I think it was 2 years ago now. I think it was 2024. Well, it was 2020. No, it was 24. It was like my birthday. I think it was like right after my birthday when I saw them, because I was visiting family and there just happened to be a show like a couple hours away. So I just got in the car and drove. Actually, I think it was more than a couple hours. So I didn't get home till like 5 o'clock in the morning, but still. They've gone through some stylistic changes. They've got some really strong stuff. Just because Try to See is so clogged right now, I'm going to put them at if no one else is playing, but they're probably my strongest rec out of the if no one else is playing tier for sure. All right. Fozzy. Chris Jericho. Love you. Great wrestler. Super entertaining in the in the ring talent, but your music's not very good. Sorry. Just hate to break it to you. However, Judas is still a banger. So, go see Judas. But the rest of their music, kind of boring in my opinion. I've seen them a couple times. Not, for someone whose career is made off entertaining, is not necessarily the best on stage entertainer at a concert. Framing Hanley for me is another no interest. I saw them before they broke up, like in 2013 or 14. Like I think right after Stupid Girl came out, and it was the most boring kind of drag of a show that I can remember, honestly. Now, obviously, I don't know the band member situation. Like I think it's like only a couple of the original members, so this might categorize under not the original singer, but I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to necessarily put that out there right now. But I think their music's pretty solid, but not a band that I have fond memories of live. From First to Last is unfortunately not the original singer situation. If it was Sunny up there, man in the mic, I would definitely put them in a borderline can't miss, just because it's just to see Skrillex in From First to Last would be insane. But their stuff is it holds up. That's what I'm gonna say. It holds up for sure. All right, Galactic Empire is unironically for me. No, not really. This is going into gimmicks. I would put it under can't miss, but I am going to make it a point, only because they're playing on a day that I was already planning on being there early, to make sure that I get there really early so that I can still catch them. For those who don't know, because I didn't actually know this until I sat down to get these logos, this is a Star Wars themed metal cover band. They play metal covers of Star Wars songs, which is just awesome. And they also play some other stuff too, but I'm assuming they're only going to play like 20 or 30 minutes. I think they open stage 4, so that's probably like a 20 or 30 minute time slot. So you'll probably get, the main Star Wars stuff, and that'll probably be about it. If you catch them on a regular show, they play some other stuff. They play like the Superman theme I saw in one of their shows. I think they played, I don't think it was Jurassic Park, but there was another pretty big like property that they were playing the music from. So not just Star Wars, but they come out dressed like members of the Galactic Empire too. So it's pretty cool. Now for me, loving Star Wars, and especially loving the music of Star Wars, I think, like, honestly, more than any other specific element, I think just the music is so good. They're like can't miss. Like I'm planning to arrive early just to see them, but that's kind of the spirit of this tier for that thing. If you're excited about hearing metal covers of Star Wars music, yeah, that's going to be great. But if you're not, like you're someone who either A, doesn't like Star Wars, or B, couldn't care about hearing Star Wars music, or any third category, for any reason you're not caring, then I can't say that, trying to keep it to general interest. Gym Class Heroes, My Heart's Stereo. Unfortunately, this group for me is going to go right next to Breathe Carolina, because they kind of occupy a similar space. Honestly, they're probably closer to a 303 in general, but I don't think quite as much of their music holds up as 303. Like 303 and Gym Class Heroes share a self-referential nature, or a self-awareness nature. They can kind of be like, okay, they're a little goofy. But what's missing with Gym Class Heroes that isn't with 303, or I would say, that I don't get as much 303, is just the music's not consistently as high quality. They have some good songs here and there, but it's not enough to carry even like a 20 or 30 minute slot, in my opinion. You're going to see them play Cupid's Chokehold and Stereo Hearts, and that's probably about it. Cookie Jar, that was another kind of, middle school banger. But, as far as being able to hold down a full time slot, I'm a little skeptical. But I would still say, if you have a hole in your schedule, they're a reliable way to fill it. All right, Highly Suspect kind of went for me. They were almost I don't necessarily want to rank them. Not that I think they're bad, but just because I don't feel like I can give a super fair assessment. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to throw two, even though I think I did like 40 bands in here. I still want to try and give it an honest assessment of everybody that I do have a level of familiarity with, and so I left them out here. I'm gonna go ahead for now and put them at the top of if or here. Let me put them I'll put them at the bottom of try to see, with the caveat that this is going to be one of the bands that I really got to like do a deep dive on, like, and really try to get more familiar with, and between now and the festival itself, because I feel like I kind of do owe that to them. They've been a steady presence now for a while, and I do like some of their like early stuff. I just haven't come up with them a whole lot. I do feel like, you know, they're kind of in that next group of, you know, mid-tier groups that are going to be kind of around for a long time. They've already made it a decade at this point, so I feel like I owe it to them to do a revisit. But I can't really say a whole lot more than that right now. Personally, I think they're pretty good, but, you know, I would try to see them, but not over a lot of the other bands we already talked about. All right, Hollywood Undead. I don't know whether I should put them in gimmicks or not, because I feel like they've kind of transcended gimmick status, but I'm gonna put them in gimmicks because it's you know, well, maybe not, because I didn't put Gym Class Heroes in gimmicks. You know, I'll put Hollywood Undead at the top of if no one else is playing. Their thing is more comedy centric. There's a lot more rap, obviously, but they have some really good stuff, really solid stuff. They make for an entertaining live show. They actually played at Rockville last year, and I missed the good part of it. Missed like a good portion of the set, because that was when I was in the merch line and it was just dead. Like, it was so moving so slow. That was the only time all weekend that I waited in a line. But I caught the last like 15 minutes, and they were still pretty entertaining. I really enjoyed them. Like, I had a lot of fun with the few songs I did get to see. They're gonna go if no one else is playing again. They're kind of a borderline gimmick, but I'll put them there for now. Ice Nine Kills is another group that's like borderline a gimmick, but you know, they've kind of transcended past that to the point where it's like a theatricality. I'm gonna make the same kind of argument that I make for like Danny Elfman as far as like not being a gimmick, because it's just one. It's like this is to the point where it is an event. It's a spectacle on its own. So for me, Ice Nine Kills is like can't miss. Theatricality, presentation, the actual music itself is really fucking good too. I think that's a big element of it. Like, all these bands make really good music, but you know, you have to buy into the gimmick a little bit more for a lot of these. With Ice Nine Kills, the music itself kind of stands on its own. So even if you're not like, I'm not like a big horror, like I'm not like obsessive, like, you know, like a lot of the horror fans are, but I do enjoy a lot of horror movies. Like, I enjoy watching them, and I have a pretty good knowledge of especially the older stuff that they're trying to make reference to. But I think the presentation, the packaging is a really big part of it. I think the music itself is just really fucking good, and makes for an entertaining show. Unfortunately, I think it's going to conflict with Guns N' Roses, but hopefully it doesn't, and we won't have to worry about it. All right, next up, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite viral sensation from Christmas time, Lamb of God. Even my dad was asking if I had seen the story about the StubHub mix-up, and I thought that was really funny, because I see stuff like that all the time. Like, I Googled a couple weeks ago AC/DC tour dates, and it said, you know, AC/DC was in my town playing for $27, which I knew was definitely not true. I got a notification from the Bands in Town app. I don't know if you guys use that, but it basically is supposed to like notify you when someone you're following is like playing a show or announces a show or sends a message through the app. And it said that Simon and Garfunkel had announced a show in my hometown. And I was like, oh, that's definitely not true. Not my hometown, but where I used to live. Like when I first moved down to Florida, years and years and years ago. And the town has like one event center. It's like a civic center. I'm like, Simon and Garfunkel will definitely not be doing their reunion here. But Lamb of God, speaking of my dad, I took him to see Pantera and Lamb of God, and I was actually shocked that he agreed to go, because Lamb of God, has this like kind of reputation as like super heavy music, a lot of screaming, not something he's into. But he told me it was one of his favorite concert experiences of his life, and that to me, perfectly justifies why I can put them at the very top of the list of all the bands that we're talking about right now. I think that even if you're not necessarily a big fan of the music, they're a heavy metal style. I would compare them to like they're kind of a more growly Pantera, with they have some more of those like lead line type. The groove metal elements of Pantera are there. They're kind of the closest for me that I've found to like scratching that Pantera itch. But there's other things that they add to the sound that I also really like. They have sometimes more of a little bit more of an alt metal sound to them. They have some more of those cool like lead licks on like what's the song called? I can't remember now. Walk With Me in Hell, that I really enjoy. But then they have songs like, they're Laid to Rest, Redneck, groovy stuff. I think that they're, what they do with the lights and the smoke is so extremely creative, and it adds this layer of, like I said with Ice Nine Kills, it's like the presentation, the spectacle to the way that they do their show is just incredible to watch on its own. And so I really think that that's enjoyable in its own aspect and just worth checking out on its own. But the music's also really good too, man. Like, I get that if you don't like growled vocals, like, unclean vocals, then I can understand it to some extent. It's just if you don't like it, you don't like it. But man, like, I still think it is so... They're just one of the best live bands that we have right now, in my opinion. So for me, they go Can't Miss. Top of Can't Miss. Lorna Shore... kind of tempted to put it the same spot. I'm going to put right with Chelsea Grin. For me, they're another one of those, like I said, with deathcore. I've just had a couple bands that stuck with me over time, and Lorna Shore is just another one of them. So that's where I'm going for now. Magnolia Park is a band that probably not a lot of people watching this are going to be familiar with, but I am. I've seen them open a couple times. They're actually, I think, semi-local to this area, like Central Florida. I want to put them kind of in this try to see, but maybe at the bottom, like right behind Highly Suspect, or maybe at the top of if no one else is playing. Because honestly, like if you have a hole in your schedule, or if you get there early enough, because I just want to double check, but I believe they're playing an early day main stage slot. Yeah, so they're playing second slot on Saturday. So if you have the time, if you get there a little bit early, there's nobody's playing yet. They're on main stage. Go check them out. They did a really good show. I just saw their Warp set too. They were really, really solid. Mayday Parade, for me, I kind of want to put in priority because for me, they kind of occupy the same kind of headspace as All Time Low. Maybe don't quite have as strong of a discography like throughout different eras of their career. I haven't listened to as much of their newer stuff. Whereas All Time Low, I think, has ironically kind of hit a peak in what they've been able to do the last like 5 or 6 years. Their older stuff still obviously stuff that resonates more with me, but they had a little bit of a lull after that. Like, can't remember why can I not? I'm blanking on the album name right now. But it had Weightless, had Lost in Stereo. Actually, the album for me that kind of lulled was the one with Time Bomb on it, and I Don't Feel Like Dancing. Dirty Work. That was when they started to lull out, and then like they kind of hit like this nadir for me where I'm like, okay, they've kind of had their time, but then like they weirdly had the comeback, Wake Up Sunshine with like Monsters and Once in a Lifetime and Some Kind of Disaster, and then Sleepwalking. They've kind of hit it back. Mayday Parade still, for me personally, hasn't had that moment. Less Than a Romantic's top 10. Top 5 emo album, debatably perfect start to finish. Love every second of it. Their first EP is super fucking good too. Everything with Jason I really like. The album Anywhere But Here, I think it's called, the one that comes right after. And then there's a few songs like later on, like Oh Well, I think is a really good song. They just don't have quite as consistently. They're not quite as consistently good. All that to say, I think it should be prioritized personally because I think that they're just going to put together a really good set list for whatever. I think I think they're closing actually stage 5, but that still only means you're going to get 40 to 45 minutes. I think it's going to be super entertaining. Unfortunately, because of that being the time, I think for a lot of the higher end bands that people do want to see, it's not necessarily going to be a priority if that's, like you're going on day one to see Godsmack and Five Finger Death Punch. For me, like taste wise. If you're like, or Stained, another one. If you don't want to see Alice Cooper, like this is kind of, a potential market replacement for that, whatever that slot ends up being. There's extra bands on the fifth stage this year, so the timing I'm not 100% as familiar with. But we'll go ahead next and talk about Memphis May Fire. I'm going to borderline put them in no interest. We'll put them at the bottom of if no one else is playing right now. This is a band that I do have to brush up on because I'm familiar with some of their early stuff, but I haven't really kept up with them over time. I do kind of know what their sound. I've heard a few songs, so I kind of newer songs, so I kind of know what the sound is and what to expect. Shout out though, another guy pulling double duty. There's a couple people pulling double duty this weekend. I believe that Dope and Static X share members as well. Memphis May Fire and Amberlin share members, and then Ellis Dunes and My Chemical Romance share members. So there's some guys putting in work this weekend, man. Non-point. They, for me, go right here with this Cold Chamber Dope group. They might probably be the strongest, or the band that I still listen to the most out of the three. Alive and Kicking, great song. Bull with a Name, one of the probably top 5 new metal songs for me, or like alt metal, whatever you want to kind of consider that. It's just a song that I still love and listen to a lot to this day. It's a really good pump up song. It's a really good, really elite level aux song too. If you're in a car with your friends and you like that style of music, like that always hits home. That's always just a big hit with everybody. All right, Parkway Drive, for me, I don't necessarily like the music as much, but I'm going to drop them up and can't miss because I believe this is their only U.S. show, at least according to the flyer, that is going to be happening all year. And to me, they're a band worth checking out just because they put on a really good show. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan overall of the music, but I've seen their live stuff, and it just hit. Like, it is really fucking solid, really solid. And also, they've been around for a really long time. You're already seeing bands that are coming up now that are influenced by Parkway Drive, and heavily so. Like a lot of bands that have kind of followed that kind of style, and been influenced and been vocal about that being an influence, and they're kind of weirdly responsible for this new generation. Not like fully. There's not like a Velvet Underground level of Parkway Drive is influential, but definitely worth checking out. And it's on a day too that for me is a little bit weaker. Personally, even excluding personal taste, I think that Friday is a little on the weaker side. So I think that kind of also plays into its favor as well for this ranking. All right, Plain White T's is probably the cringiest band that is on this entire list. But for me, they occupy a very similar space to 303. You're going to have a good time if you go see them and you're familiar and you like that music. If you like the songs from the Plain White T's, you're going to have a good time. And even if you don't, they're a fan, more family friendly. All their songs are really simple. Again, they're very cringe in certain aspects, but I grew up with this music, so I can be a little bit less harsh toward it. Someone like my brother would probably hate this because they're like, "What? This is so stupid." But Rhythm of Love, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey There Delilah is a certified hood classic, as they like to say. Probably the weirdest number one song ever, or like the weirdest band to go number one ever. Just because they had such a strange career. But they're pretty much 303, but instead of making electropop club parodies, they're making like really sweet and earnest love songs, and I really enjoy that. So you're gonna have a good time. All right, Poppy. I've been disrespecting Poppy for a really long time. I talk about who was the best live band, best live act right now, and she's up there in this conversation for me with Lamb of God. I'm gonna drop her behind Lamb of God, but her live show is absolutely insane. I've seen her once. I'm a fan for life after that. I don't admittedly listen to her music as much as I probably should, but super high level live act. It was truly elite, great fucking special talent that we have right now, and I'm happy to see her get up. I think this is third on the billing for main stage, which you're getting into a range where you're playing at sunset, playing when it's starting to get dark outside. I think you're in a really good spot as far as a career trajectory and playing these festivals. So, all that aside, this is a little bit heavier. This is a little bit more kind of weird. There's a lot more of that this year in general anyway. But, I think it makes for a very entertaining show. I think we got a couple more gimmicks. Yeah, we still do. But Psycho Stick is one. They're like a comedy metal group. I get quite a bit of enjoyment out of stuff that I've heard from them. Their songs in the games, especially, I think they Rock Band, Guitar Hero, whichever ones they are, very, very fun to play. Charts in those games, so I just have fond memories of them. All right, Red. I borderline want to put into no interest, but they do have one really, really good song that I like. No, they have a few. They have a few good songs that I like. They kind of unfairly get pigeonholed because of the Christian thing, more so than Flyleaf. Even their music is a little bit more overt. I think in certain ways, like their biggest song is literally "Breathe Into Me." I don't think you can take that really any other way. 1,000-foot crutch levels of subtlety that we got going on there. But I think they are just really solid. Honestly, I'm gonna put them right here with this Cold Chamber Dope and Nonpoint trio. I think they fit right into that same exact kind of opinion. You're gonna have they make really good, enjoyable live music. It's a little bit heavier, more straightforward new metal. If you can get over a little bit of the Christian thematics and kind of just take it for what it is at face value, I think that they're really enjoyable. Saliva's another, not the original singer. I will give them credit. Actually, I think their singer's been in the band longer than Josie Scott at this point, at least as far as performing and recording. But I really enjoyed when I saw them live at the pre-party 2 years ago. I think their new singer is pretty good. He's obviously, his voice sounds a little bit different, but probably one of the ones on this list that I would still be more interested in checking out if you haven't seen them already, just to hear those songs performed live. All right, next we're going to talk about Census Fail. For me personally, can't miss. Not literally, but they're one of my favorite bands. I would say if you haven't seen them before, definitely try to see them. Just trying to take my own personal taste out of it. I'm going to put them in here right behind Dance Gavin Dance because I still think that they're really good live. Now, one thing that you might kind of be a little bit offset by is his voice isn't quite as doesn't hold up quite as well on some of the older songs, but I think that's kind of a little bit kind of par for the course as far as most of these bands, especially the older ones, is that just some of the older stuff, the vocal range is a little bit off, but it's not to me anyway, as a big fan, it's never been a big deal. But I do think that they're still a really consistently good live band, and they can put together a great 20 minutes, one of the best 25 to 30 minute sets of almost any band that you're going to see, especially at the time frame that they're playing, because they're going to be a mid-afternoon stage 5 slot. You're going to get a really good show from them. All right, we're getting to the point we have to scroll, which is kind of crazy. I didn't really think about how many groups are actually here this year. It's kind of insane. This is the longest tier list we've done so far. Seven Dust for me, I would say priority over overall time low, right behind Alice Cooper feels right to me. I think they're still such a just fucking good, solid, consistent live act. Again, like I just said with Census Fail, one of the best 20 to 30 minutes you're probably going to get all weekend. But I think that they're a little bit more just reliable consistently and more of an appeal across the board. Census Fail's more on the emo side. They got some lyrics that are kind of objectionable, borderline criminal. Well, actually, not even borderline. Some of them just are criminal. They're literally describing crimes. But Seven Dust for me, when I think of they're just solid, reliable, but they put on a great show. Their songs are really, really good in a live setting. And this is just one that, you get your friends together, whoever you're with, and you're just gonna have a good time if you go to Seven Dust. In my opinion, that's pretty much it. I don't have more of a justification really besides that. Sick Puppies is another, not the original singer. I absolutely love their first two albums, Tripolar and what's the first one called? I can't remember. But before their singer, actually they did one right before their singer left too. There's no going back on it. But My World, great song. All the Same, fantastic song. And then they hit that stride. You're Going Down, maybe. Odd One, Riptide, all those songs are so solid. I would definitely say check them out if you get the chance. Unfortunately for me, I think when they're playing, I'm probably not going to really be there just because of the way the things line up. because it's Friday. It's the weaker day. They're playing kind of early, but I'll be there if I'll be there if it lines up. I still think their music's solid. Simple Plan is closing a third stage on the strongest day of the week, and unfortunately, they're going to conflict with a band that I'm going to put ahead of them. But on the off chance you don't like that band, let me just say this: I think that I'm going to put them ahead of Seven Dust, because if you enjoy or don't not enjoy lyrics that are too self-serious, this kind of ties back into the 303 kind of plain white tees thing. If you turn your cringe off, you're at a live show, the whininess doesn't bother you as much. I think Simple Plan is one of the better sets that you're going to see again. You're going to get a solid 40 minutes. You're going to run the gamut. You got your faster kind of skatey stuff. You got I Do Anything. You got your Addicted. It scratches a different itch than that. Scratches a different itch than Welcome to My Life, and then Perfect's, a whole other thing. You got a lot of variety, but it's also, these quick songs. They go, you're gonna hear What's New Scooby Doo. What more could you want than that, right? So I'm gonna put them in priority. Personally, I think this is exactly the right spot, honestly, and I'm disappointed, man. If they don't put one of my all-time favorite bands ahead of them, I would check them out. But it is what it is. Sleeping with Sirens is another priority for me. I'm gonna put them behind All Time Low, but ahead of Mayday Parade. They fit into that same kind of pocket as Mayday Parade for me, where their early stuff is super strong. But I think what I think about Sleeping with Sirens is that the later stuff that they pick out, they play a couple songs from later in their career that I enjoy more than Mayday Parade. And then honestly, just in general, I think Sleeping with Sirens' best songs are better than Mayday Parade's best songs. Not by maybe a whole lot, but a little bit heavier. Mayday Parade's a little bit more just like the softer emo side, and then Sleeping with Sirens got some screaming and stuff. So a little bit different, but also in spirit, they're very similar. So they're going to go right next to each other for now. All right, next we got Stained. Kind of closer to the downswing of their career at this point. Interestingly, I a couple years ago they were the last band, the second to last band playing, and now they're on the second stage, playing before Five Finger Death Punch. It's kind of weird. I honestly don't know where I want to put Stained, because if you haven't seen Stained, I think they're definitely worth checking out at least once. But I don't think they're anything super particularly great. I'll drop them right behind All Time Low for now. The old stuff still hits. That first album, Dysfunctions, got some great stuff on it. I don't know how much of it they'll play. But, Raw, Mud Shovel, obviously. The second album is the one that's stacked with all their best stuff. I'll still go to bat for a couple songs from... Obviously, it's been... Look, if you don't like It's Been a While, there's something wrong with you. But Fade for me and For You have always just been... those songs is just solid. Just, I think, great songs and super enjoyable. And I like their other stuff, too. I like Outside still. I still like So Far Away, a little bit on the cringe side of things. But, they got some good stuff. They got some underrated stuff kind of late in their catalog, too. I think the only thing for them that kind of doesn't make me put them a little bit higher, although now that I'm looking at it, maybe I think I'm going to bump Seven Dust down behind Stained, because it's honestly kind of the same thing, except for Stained has not as much consistency, but the peak is a little bit higher. So I'm going to put Seven Dust here instead. I think I like this more now that I'm looking at it, actually. So Stained for me, you should definitely try to check them out. But there's, again, it comes down to kind of preference and different things like that. But I think that if you haven't seen them, especially, they're definitely a solid, good performance out of them. Starset for me, I don't know what it is about this group. I cannot get into them. I think they're super, for a band that shouldn't be this way, kind of uninteresting live. I think that their gimmick should play up pretty well. For me, the reason that they're not a gimmick is because their music is a little bit more straightforward, even if the presentation isn't. It's kind of like the opposite. A lot of these gimmick bands are making gimmicky songs. Starset's not making gimmicky songs. They just present in a weird way. State Champs is another group that I'm gonna put. Um, I really want to put them in no interest because I I haven't listened to them in a long time, and I just don't. I only have bad memories of their singer. I'm gonna put them in if no one else is playing for now, but that could very easily kind of get bumped down. Honestly, Static X is not the original singer. I conflicting feelings about Static X as far as a touring act. I think I talked about this a little bit because they're playing the other festivals, but it's just odd. It's just kind of weird, and I'm still not kind of used to it, even though it's been a few years now. But they were a band that I really liked a lot pre Main Static Death, obviously. So it's a little bit tough for me to still see them around. But I think I'm happy about it at the end of the day. But all right, we got Story of the Year we're going to talk about now. This is another, like, this band's just been around forever, and they just put on such a good live show that I want to put them here on priority personally. Honestly, the craziest part about Story of the Year is that if I made this tier list like 2 or 3 years ago, like pre-COVID, they would have been like a low try to see, a high if no one else is playing. Even though their live show was still good, they just didn't have kind of the catalog to back it up, because really they're a one album wonder. They got some decent stuff off their second album, but they're carried off the strength of the 4 really good songs on their first album that stand out so far and above everything else they've ever made. But then they just put out an album a couple years ago that's got songs they play live that are like on the level of the first album, which is insane. Like how you can just pull off that kind of out of nowhere kind of comeback later in your career. And I think that just strengthens their live set so much more. I've seen them live, I think 3 times now. Yeah, I believe the Warped set was the 3rd time I saw them live. And they're just consistently show stealer for me. Like every time I have high expectations and they still crush it. Like when I saw them on Yellow Card Reunion Tour, they were still the band that I liked the most, and they played the fewest songs, and they played at the beginning. So they were still the band that I kind of came away like, dude, Story of the Year is so good. All right, we got Switchfoot to talk about next. Another Christian influenced adjacent band. I like their older stuff decently well. A lot of the stuff I do like, unfortunately, they don't play live, and a lot of their heavier stuff they don't play live either, other than like Meant to Live. The Beautiful Letdown, still a really good album. I listen to that like fairly regularly. I like Oh Gravity a lot. And what's the album in the middle? With Stars and Lonely Nation on it. I like that album a lot too. But unfortunately, that's I think live they don't really bring it. There's something missing that doesn't necessarily translate. I'm gonna put them if no one else is playing, kind of around the same range. We'll put them with Red. Actually, I'm going to put them behind these new metal bands because I would, if push came to shove, I would probably try to check these guys out a little bit more. I'm going to drop Red back here too, because to me, like Red and Switchfoot are kind of similar, even though the style's a little bit different. Just because it's a more Christian influenced, kind of approach, and the outputs, just live show wise, I think Switchfoot is going to be a little bit weaker. It's just that something about them live doesn't hit the same for some reason. The Ataris, we're going to go ahead and drop into low try to see / high if no one else is playing. I'm going to put them at try to see right now. I think they're pretty good live. They got most of the So Long Astoria lineup back now. That's what their setlist leans heavily into. And this is like kind of how you keep your career going as a one album wonder. Like you just cater to that audience who wants to hear you play Boys of Summer, and then just lean on your strong material from that era. This is kind of the blueprint for the Ataris, and I still think that they're one of the better bands to do that with, because I think they have a really strong album to do that off the back of. So, they can keep pulling off. All right, the Ready Set, I have so many memories of listening to in middle school, and I think all of them have aged very poorly. Their music is very similar to Breathe Carolinas in a specific sense, but I think that for me, it just hasn't held up as well when I go back to listen to it now. Love Like Whoa still remains such a staple middle school banger, but I gotta drop them on no interest. Honestly, I can't build my day around that. Being the case, unfortunately. The Wonder Years, I got to drop kind of toward the back end of if no one else is playing, because for me, they kind of occupy a similar headspace as State Champs, although I think the singer is a little bit better. But it's just it's a style of pop punk that I have mixed feelings about, and it really honestly depends on who makes it, because I feel like there's some bands that pull it off better than others. I think Neck Deep, I think even 4 Years Strong I have ranked a little bit higher, but I think like Neck Deep is an example of a band that pulls it off in a way that I really enjoy, and I listen to their music a lot. And then bands like Wonder Years and State Champs, I want to like more, but I can't really, for some reason, make that investment. I don't know why. The Word Alive, I'm going to drop next to Memphis May Fire, because they also similarly occupy that. They're kind of like the State Champs and Wonder Years thing. They occupy this type of, new metalcore, post-metalcore band, that has heavy stuff. They make some more kind of rock-influenced, lighter, poppy stuff recently that I want to go back and check out to make a little bit more defined of a ranking on, but just that's where I'm going to put it for now. We got Tom Morello in the house, and unfortunately, Rage Against the Machine is over, and I don't really like Tom Morello's solo stuff that much. He does play some Rage, but not a whole lot. I'm gonna drop him in no interest, honestly. You gotta pay respect to Tom Morello for still kicking it, still doing live shows, but just not something that I'm gonna see myself checking out. Under Oath, technically not the original singer, but I believe that the singer they've had for most of their tenure is still here at this point. I am gonna put them, I would say, probably the same spot. I think like Architects is kind of fair. Yeah, they're a little older. Their styles changed a little bit over the years. They still got the old stuff to back it up, but I like this band a lot. I do like Under Oath a lot, and I would like to see them live, but it just never is lined up the way that I was hoping it would. We the Kings, I liked to say for a long time that they were really underrated, but honestly, like the more that I have sat with it, I don't even know if I think that's true anymore. Because the stuff I did like is all off the first album. They're kind of like a one album wonder-ish. Check Yes Juliet, classic, will live on forever. But, just for some reason the other material doesn't hold up for me the way that I kind of always thought it would. Just based off of that, though, I'm gonna put them right behind this kind of new metal and then the Christian groups. Yeah, I think that's where I like them. Whitechapel, last deathcore band I'm really gonna talk about. They've stuck with me more so even than Chelsea Grin and Lorna Shore. I'm gonna put them maybe at the bottom of priority, top of Try to See. I'll put them at the top of Try to See for now. I think they're really solid. Just good music that I enjoy. Yellow Wolf is I won't want to say a gimmick, but I'm gonna put them under gimmick because this is like the only hip hop act that we really have. I've never really resonated with Yellow Wolf the same way that some other people have. Maybe I'll come around on that by the time the festival comes. But if you're not gonna be into the idea of seeing a rapper at Welcome to Rockville, you're probably not, and especially the type of rap that we're talking about here, probably not going to be super interested. All right. We're getting toward the big boys here. Yellow Card for me is a can't miss. I'm gonna reorder this a little bit. I'm gonna move up Ice Nine Kills ahead of Flyleaf, and then I'm gonna put Yellow Card ahead of Flyleaf as well, because I would still say Ice Nine Kills should go ahead. But this is where I kind of get into the ranking aspect of it more so. I'm trying to think in my head. I'm like, okay, if it came down to it and there was a conflict, who am I picking? And I would pick Yellow Card over Flyleaf. Yellow Card, also debatably a one album wonder. The thing that gives them the edge for me is, I think literally like just this month, or maybe it was a couple months ago now, they just put out a new album. And that album, similarly to Story of the Year, has 3 or 4 songs that I could picture just being on their set list for the next decade, and I wouldn't have a problem with it, and it strengthens their live show a lot. And to be honest, Ocean Avenue is just like the best emo album maybe of the decade or of the century. Obviously I know, not literally, but it's just so strong front to back. They could play any 5 songs off that album, but having those first 4 songs, actually only one's a little bit later in the set list, but having the Ocean Avenue, having Breathing, and having Way Away, and then also having only one on top of that, your set list is just gonna, you have half a set list right there of just that, or like a good 20 minutes of just that, and you can just sustain off that pretty much. But I think their live performance still holds up really well. They're really good. His voice is still one of the best voices in my opinion of that whole scene, that pop punk emo scene. And I think there's a really fucking good time live. The only kind of issue with their set, in my opinion, or thing that might hold it back, is they do stack a lot of the more well-known stuff early, but I still think that the back half of the show is still enjoyable from when I saw them at Warped Tour. You know, I talked about Double Duty a little bit earlier. I forgot about Zakk Wylde with his Black Label Society and Zach Sabbath doubleheader. This is the last gimmick we're going to talk about or encounter because, like I said, the rest are mostly just like in the headliner-ish range. Zach Sabbath is just Zakk Wylde playing Black Sabbath covers. And honestly, that's kind of sick. Like, I'm very intrigued by that. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't. But, you know, if it aligns up, I hope it does. I would definitely like to check that out. All right, we're going to get into the big boys now. We're going to start with the second slot on the main stage, and we're going to talk about Thursday first. We're talking about Godsmack. This is a band that I thought honestly was dead. When they stopped making music, I thought they were going to turn into a legacy act. Now they're talking about making new music again. Half the band left that has been there since the beginning, so that's just kind of weird. And I struggle to still feel like Godsmack is anything more than just like the most mid 2000s band, honestly. Like, and I don't even mean that in terms of quality. I just mean that in terms of the time frame. They were around, they made music for a while, and it was always all right. It was never that great. And you know, some of it stuck around with me, some of it hasn't. There's especially the most recent stuff I think kind of sucks. Like the When Legends Rise era, and then whatever like this last album was called, Lighting Up the Sky, I think. You know, I want to put them even lower, but I'm going to put them at the top of if no one else is playing, because I think that if there's somebody that you legitimately want to see, like, you should go see them. Like, personally, I mean, unless you want to see a 10-minute drum battle, there's nothing that Godsmack's going to do that you're not going to get from a different band, in my opinion. And the drum battle, honestly, like, is kind of a deterrent. Now, when I say drum battle, I literally mean 10-minute drum battle. They will stop their set. They will not play their own songs for 10 minutes and do a drum battle between their drummer and their lead singer, who used to be the drummer. Why they do that? I mean, it's cool. It's kind of a cool concept on a tour stop, maybe. But at a festival set, you know, you're trying to think about, I got this band I could see instead. You know, just looking now, if I look at the schedule, and again, Thursday's the most kind of up in the air day because Guns N' Roses is going to inevitably have the longest set that's ever been played at a Rockville festival. You know, you're looking at who else is kind of lined up at around that time frame. You could be missing Atreyu, could be missing Ice Nine Kills, could be missing Death Clock. I've had, I have all of those bands ahead right now. Actually, did I talk about? Yeah. Well, Death Clock's in Gimmicks, but still, I would see Death Clock over Godsmack easily. Like, no question about it. So, you know, their music's good, solid. Like I said, if you don't want to see any of those bands, maybe go check them out. But I can't really speak much higher of them than that, to be honest. The Offspring for me, you know, I like a lot. I think they're pretty good. They're going to be, you know, 50 minutes of really just solid, reliable. I'm going to put them at the top of priority. I think that they have really good music that is super enjoyable, great in a live setting. The only kind of curveball that's potentially there is his voice. I've seen them 3 times, and 2 out of the 3 times were good. The first time, which was also at Welcome to Rockville, wasn't there, honestly. His voice was just off that day. I don't know what it was, but didn't click. But the last time I saw them, they were really good. And I saw them at their own show, and it was one of my favorite concerts that I went to that year. So I just think they're really solid, really good. You're not going to get a better set from a lot of other bands just throughout this weekend. Motionless in White, I will admit, is kind of a soft spot for me currently. I'm not the most familiar with their newer stuff, and even by newer, it's still several years old at this point. For me right now, I'm going to put them as try to see, because I still think, you know, I have a very high opinion of them based on the fact that they were very good in their early career. And from what I've seen, they put together a great live show. They've been opening for Bring Me the Horizon. Watched several of the clips from that. Looks fantastic. I think they were there last year, and it was on the day that I missed. They were at Warped Tour, and I saw little bits here and there, and they looked like they were putting on a great show. So I'm gonna get more familiar with them and put a better ranking on it. But for now, I'm just gonna drop them in the top of the try to see tier. Rise Against. This is where I kind of have to be a little bit like more for me personally. They're gonna be a can't miss. Like I would say, probably a top 4 to 5 priority on the entire weekend. Be like them. Bring Me the Horizon, Biffy Clyro. Just off the top of my head, just thinking of just personally what I'm like kind of set on. Like I need to see these bands over anybody else. I don't care who's the conflict with. But for now, I'm gonna put them with the Offspring because I feel like they occupy a similar space. The Rise Against music isn't just quite not as appealing for somebody who's not into that genre. Whereas I feel like the Offspring, I try and think about it this way: if I just brought someone who's never heard the music, they're going to be more inclined to like the Offspring versus Rise Against. Rise Against is a little bit more political, a little more punky, kind of spirit to them. So, and their song structures are a little weirder too. Like they're not the most straightforward rock band that's ever existed as far as this compositionally. So, I think they're really good though. They look great live. They've always looked like really good live. The only hesitation is just please don't play any of your new music because it's not very good. Five Finger Death Punch, is pretty much exactly the same thing as Godsmack, but just better in my opinion. I'm gonna put them at the top of if no one else is playing. I like to think that I'm even a little bit more charitable to Five Finger Death Punch than most people. But to me, honestly, the biggest holdup is not necessarily any of the things that you might think. It's not, the depiction of the band. It's not the antics, any of that stuff. It's just that I think that ever since Wrong Side of Heaven, their music has just not been good. Like it's gone down a declining path. It's not as consistent, I should say. I still like some of the songs they've made in that post era. Wash It All Away, actually, I believe, comes from after that time, and that's one of my favorite songs that they've ever done. I love Trouble. I like When the Seasons Change, I think it's called. That song's all right. It's pretty good. Like, similar-ish to how I feel about some of their older stuff on the lower end, obviously. And Welcome to the Circus, I think, is a good song. Most of their stuff, their best material is off the first 2 albums, and then some stuff off Wrong Side of Heaven as well. First 3 albums. And they just don't play like anything from that time frame. They play like The Bleeding at the end, and that's it. And they play like their Bad Company cover. But they're not playing like, Walk Away or Ashes or any of the stuff that I think like when I like really think about what I like about Five Finger Death Punch or what they do best is their early material. And the longer you go on as a band, you're going to stray away from that, and that's fine. But I'm going to adjust my ranking accordingly. And I think that based on their current career status and set list, I think they're perfectly fine, perfectly adequate. But not somebody that I would recommend if any of the bands that would potentially be playing at the same time are ahead of them. Just kind of how I look at it. Turnstile. I honestly got to admit, like when I talk about the bands that are kind of on the up and coming list, I always forget about them too. Kind of similar to Poppy, they're in that like best live band we have, that's hasn't been around for that long kind of discussion too. I'm gonna put them in the priority list though, because for me, I think that you have to be a little bit more. They're a little bit more abrasive, a little bit kind of tougher to sell necessarily. They're not as straightforward of a sell. To like a non-listener or somebody who's not, necessarily into that style of music inherently. They're like from just a general kind of rock fan, or somebody who, isn't into like that because they're punk too, like more just like Rise Against, but they're more edge, like it's tough to kind of put into words, but that's just kind of what I feel about them. That said, the live performance itself is incredible. They're a great live band. Highly recommend from that specific aspect of it, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and put them in the priority, right between Alice Cooper and Simple Plan. Breaking Benjamin. I again got to try and take some bias out of this. I'm not going to quite put them in a can't miss, even though for me they are a can't miss. Like personally, they're one of my favorite bands, and especially favorite live bands. They've gone through a lot of evolution, but I think that in their current iteration, they're probably as strong live as they've ever been. And I've seen them live quite a few times now. I've seen them live going back, 10, 15 years at this point. Before I saw them live before they broke up. So that's like 15 years ago at this point, because I think they broke up officially in like 2011, maybe 2012. So, or well, I guess they technically went on hiatus, but whatever. Breaking Benjamin's live set. One thing that they do really well, they've had a long career. They've had a lot of different distinct eras at this point. They represent their old eras very well. They keep the set list very balanced across their career, while still playing all the songs that you would want to hear from them. So you're still going to hear obviously your Diary of Jane, Breath, So Cold, I Will Not Bow. You're going to get all that represented. You're going to get Failure. You're going to get Red Cold River. But then they mix in album tracks. Like the last time I saw them, they played Had Enough. Dude, that's a song that had probably 10 million streams on Spotify, and they're like a very well streamed band. So that's like probably the 10th most streamed song on Phobia. They play Follow. That's like the 6th or 7th probably most popular song off their first album, and which is already probably their least popular record to begin with. They played. What did they play from? Without You. They played from Dear Agony. They played Dear Agony at Rockville 2 years ago. A lot of songs that weren't given the most run on radio, weren't super successful. But they still try to make it a special show for the people who do like the band and who follow the band for a long time. And I really like that when bands do that. Rise Against actually kind of does that too. They played Under the Knife, like an album track off The Sufferer and The Witness. They play Chamber of the Cartridge is another one. From that era. They play Long Forgotten Sons off of Appeal to Reason. They still play Like the Angel, which is a song from before when they were even famous. Like, they still have Paper Wings off of Siren Song. They're still doing things that are special for their fans and people who've been there for a long time and playing those album cuts. So I really like that. That said, there's few bands that are going to contend with the level of set list that you're going to get from Breaking Benjamin. So I still am going to put them there. A Day to Remember is another one of my favorite bands, and look, as much as their new music is inconsistent, to put it charitably, this is probably a top 5 live band that we have right now. And we're blessed this year. We got some of the best live acts that are out right now. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm glad that they're going to get to close the stage, because you're going to get pretty much their full tour set, I think. When I saw them at Warp, I didn't stay around for the full set, but I believe they played the regular set list from the rest of their tour. So about 17 songs, like an hour 15. And it's great to see them continue to rise and ascend up these set lists, up these billings. And I think that this is kind of the apex that I was hoping for as a person who's been a longtime fan of the band. They've ascended to big heights. If you're the second from the top billing to fucking My Chemical Romance, especially on a festival, you're in a really good spot in your career. And I think it's a good culmination of things for them to be here. Florida locals obviously doesn't hurt either, because they did the same thing a couple years ago. They played a one-off show when they weren't really touring, when they were recording the last album. But like I said, one of the best live bands that we have. They do a really good job of representing all the eras of their group. They throw in some occasional album tracks here and there, songs that they don't perform regularly. They'll try and rotate out some of them, and then their new stuff. Like I said, it's inconsistent, but a lot of the stuff they play live is some of the better stuff. Even though I absolutely despise the All My Friends song, I think it's one of their worst written songs lyrically in a very long time. But or probably ever. But yeah, that's kind of it for A Day to Remember, in my opinion. Let's get to the headliners. I think are all gonna go into Can't Miss, but it's interesting to have the conversation about Guns N' Roses anyway. Even though for me, I think they're a Can't Miss. Look, it's tough because they're probably gonna play for 3 hours. Probably gonna meander. You're gonna hit a part of the set list where they're playing Coma and Estranged and November Rain probably back to back, and you hear 3 songs in 30 minutes, and you're standing the whole time, and you're like, dude, this is a drag. This is tough. How am I gonna make it through? But this is my counter argument, and it's very, very straightforward to me. It's Guns N' Roses. Gotta see Guns N' Roses. Axl, look, I understand there's clips that are not the most favorable to his voice. This is like almost entirely dependent on how strong his voice is actually going to sound, because this could end up being one of the biggest disappointments of the weekend. But if he doesn't push his voice too hard, I've seen some Guns N' Roses shows recently where he's still, a spectacle. You got to see, he is a unique voice, truly, and a great performer. It's Guns N' Roses. There's a mixed reaction, and I understand completely why. But just where I stand on things, they're legends. I think that they're definitely worth headlining status, and maybe 3 hours is a little much, but at the end of the day, that's kind of part of the experience, right? It's always been about excess. Foo Fighters, I almost don't want to put on Can't Miss, but I am going to. Honestly, the headliners would be the top 4 most likely, but Foo Fighters, I think I underrate a little bit, and I think part of it's just because they're given this kind of ascendant status, because I think there's no truly great 2000s band as far as impact to music, and where everybody's this band really was this the same way that we've had in previous decades. And I think that in a lot of people's minds, Foo Fighters are a continuation of the 90s. They were around in the 90s. Obviously Dave Grohl was in Nirvana, but then first Foo Fighters album came out 96. Color and the Shape I think was 98 or 97. So they left a mark on the 90s, but then they also had a quick turnaround in the 2000s, and they were a very prolific band. They've never taken an extended 5+ year break. They've just been out chugging, churning out albums and radio hits, and they can put together a really solid 20-song set list where you're going to know 14 songs, and all of them are songs you've heard a billion times. So just from that perspective, I'm going to put them under Can't Miss. I just think their live show's really good too. It's solid, high production value. Dave Grohl is a really good frontman. He's hit all the notes. They're literally the definition of just go out and play the hits. They understand the assignment. We're going to talk about Bring Me the Horizon. For me, they're going in Can't Miss, and they're going to be the number 1 for me overall. And I'm going to continue to say, just like the last 2, because I've talked about them and every video that I've made so far, I think they're the best live band we have today. I've been a fan of them for many years. I've seen them live during several iterations. I'm not a huge fan of the set list right now, just because it's not the stuff that I like from them the most. But watching them perform, being there for their performances, having the experiences I've had, and watching what they become over time has been incredible. They truly are probably the best live band that we have right now. I think bar none. I think they are the standard setter for live shows currently in the rock and metal scene. And if you aren't going to see them because you don't like them, then that's totally on you, and that's your decision. But I think if you haven't seen them live and you're open to it, this is going to be one of the highlights of the weekend. This is one of the things I am looking forward to the most. And it's on a day that I'm going to be the most tired. So hopefully that anticipation will help me power through. All right, we'll talk about My Chemical Romance. Look, Black Parade, top 5 album, probably emo scene importance-wise ever. Personally, for me, I like 3 Chairs a little bit more. But that's it. They're going to play all Black Parade, and I went to see them, even though I'm not the biggest fan. I went to see them, and I liked the presentation and the way that they went through the album, and I'm curious to see how it translates to the festival set. I watched their Shaky Knees set to kind of see where they made some cuts to the presentation, because when I saw them, the Black Parade portion alone was almost 2 hours long, and then they played a whole nother set basically after that. Going toward the festival setup, it's pretty much just going to be the album and then a couple of the other big hits. So when they did Shaky Knees, they played 4 songs. When they did When We Were Young, they only played 2. So I think they're going to get a full hour and a half, hour 45 type set, and probably play the 3 other big songs and then one other. We'll see. We'll see exactly how it works out. But Black Parade's a really good album. Just start to finish is really solid, reliable. I know I said solid about 52 times, but there's a lot of good genre representation. My Chem gets pigeonholed in emo. They're kind of like the premier emo band, or the most prominent emo band, and there's good reasons for that. They have a lot of good emo anthems and bangers, but there's stuff that's influenced by punk, like straight punk, like, you know, a song like Thank You for the Venom. And just let's talk about just on Black Parade alone. You got a song like Dead, that's like a Misfits song basically, like in terms of the way that it's structured, the way it sounds. You know, that's punky as hell. You got a song like Sleep, that's this epic, grandiose song. It feels just massive. You got a song like Disenchanted that has this crazy build up to it. I Don't Love You, which feels like an 80s kind of soft rock song with a great guitar solo in it. Like, you know, Teenagers has like a 60s garage rock feel to it. You know, I think a little bit of the genre pigeonholing is a little bit unfair to what this band is actually capable of. And part of the reason that they were so revered is just they can cover so much ground. You know, you ask like 7 different fans what their favorite 5 songs are, you might get a list. You might not have 2 lists with any of the same songs on them. Like, you know, they cover a lot of ground. So I'm going to be a My Chemical Romance defender, even though I'm not a huge fan overall. But or like, you know, as much as everybody else, I still think they're a really good band. But anyway, this is the list. I think you're gonna zoom out a little bit, but this is the list. Other than the bands that I didn't rank, I'll go ahead and hide myself, so that way you can see where we ended up. Actually, I'm only blocking Zach Sabbath. I don't need to block myself, but you know, that's it. Let me know what you think down below, where your kind of differences lie, and we can talk about it. Any evaluation that I want to elaborate on a little bit more, you know, might be down there as well. If you do like this, make sure you subscribe, leave a like, let me know what you think. We are streaming now as well pretty regularly, so we've been doing at least a stream every week for the last few weeks, so it's been going pretty good. So go ahead and follow, subscribe, hit that bell so you know when we go live. Drop by, topic suggestions, anything like that, let me know. Thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed. See you next time.